The drawings were done on standard 8.5 by 11 sheets of typing paper. And I used a ballpoint pen, and what I wanted to convey was that this was accessible. It wasn't about the materials, it was about the skills and the imagination. My style of placing creatures almost as if staging them in a diorama, that came from Rudolf Zallinger. Zallinger was an artist that I found in a book who painted these murals of dinosaurs for the Museum of Natural History at Yale in the 1940s. I loved the way that he painted the dinosaurs, and the landscapes were very mysterious and colorful, and just the way that he placed the animals in this almost still quality where they're sort of hanging out and presenting themselves. There was almost a surreal quality to the painting, and even the creatures that seemed to be pursuing each other, there was still sort of a stillness in the artwork, and this mysterious feeling about this time long ago. The first drawings I liked to do were of airplanes and cars and insects, and then I started to draw dinosaurs. And I even got a little popular drawing dinosaurs in grade school. But I was really quiet and I didn't say much. I had what you would call now social anxiety. One day students even cornered me and, they were asking me to say something. And I was labeled shy and the guy who never said anything, the boy who never spoke. My family had land in the Santa Cruz Mountains. It was on the summit of the mountain. My dad would be busy on various projects, and I would go around for hours just wandering on hands and knees, looking at large furry ants and trying to find lizards. And, one day I was digging for a lizard and I happened upon this scorpion that was in this little cave that it had created. When I look at my drawings, I see my dad's land a lot. I see the trees and the sandy ground, the big boulders, the buzzing insects and the reptiles. There's something about the summit of a mountain. It's its own environment because the wind and the rain is pulling the land downward. And so the topsoil is being depleted and leaving the sandy ground behind, and only certain species of pine trees, for example, could live and survive there. It was mine to walk among as a child, so as a teenager it was within me, and I was getting it out and expressing it onto the page. I remember in grade school, we had this project where the teacher told us to pick 3 animals and then combine them. So it might be a lion and a monkey and an eagle that you put together. And then you end up with your own fantastic beast. I used to like to draw movie monsters like King Kong. And I remember my brother sat down with me one day and he said, you're drawing other people's creations. This is somebody else's imagination. What about your imagination? What about being original? I took that to heart, and I went back to that exercise where I combined the animals, and so I started doing that, and I liked the results. And so I continued with this and kept on putting different animals together, and I had a sense of alien creatures and aspects of science fiction and fantasy and the mythological worlds. When I did a drawing, I usually would start with an eye, and then I would draw around the eye, get some detail there, and then start moving toward the face structure, and then create the shapes, like the shape of the head or the limbs. And then I would end up with a final body. And I would rarely know where I was going to go with it because I never had a preconceived idea of what I was going for. So I would just follow the shape that I created and then turn that into a creature. I remember seeing the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad at a drive-in theater, and later I found out that Ray Harryhausen was the one who did the special effects and the animation. I became a big Ray Harryhausen fan, and so a lot of what I did was influenced by Harryhausen. And I was also influenced by a lot of the films that were coming out at the time, like Star Wars, and how it combined science fiction and fantasy imagery. The drawings were somewhat freehand in the sense that the backgrounds, the landscapes, and the shading were done freehand. But usually I would design the characters, the creatures, in a sketchbook and work them out and work out the composition ahead of time. And then I would take a blank sheet of paper and then trace it and then go in with the details and the shading. In junior high school, I started doing animation. My older brothers taught me animation. It was like magic watching my models moving across the screen, and I was always excited and filled with anticipation to see the final animation projected on the wall. My brothers taught me how to take the object and move it a quarter of an inch, and then step back and take a picture, and then step forward again and move the object again another quarter of an inch, and then step back and take another picture. And first it was claymation, and then I started creating my own animated puppets that were articulated with skeletons of wire. And then I would build them up with cotton balls and latex that my brother had brought home from the art store from his college. So a lot of these drawings that I did in high school were about drawing and designing these creatures that would be made into animated models. I experimented with shading and with cross-hatching and a scribbling style and the softer graphite style. In my second year of high school, I started getting some successes, social successes, and I remember the first day of school, the orientation, and I had brought my drawings to school. I had them in a folder, and I opened them up, and I was taking a look at them, and people started looking at them, and next thing I knew, the whole table was passing my drawings around, and it was kind of like an assembly room, like an assembly line, where the students would look at the drawing and then pass it along, and then the next student would look at a drawing and then pass it along, and so the drawings went from student to student, and by then I had about 30 to 40 drawings, so there was a lot for people to look at. And so though I was still very quiet, I was surprised that I could have this type of interaction with other people. It was like a moment of popularity, but I was still, very painfully shy. But it showed me the possibility and the power of art and being able to connect and to communicate something to others, because I was still very shy, and I saw this as a way of maybe being a part of the world in some way. Because with social anxiety, you are continually isolating, basically. You are in the world, but you are also within yourself. You're in your own mind, and there's anxiety around other people. And then I met Brent, and Brent was an artistic-minded person as well, and we became friends. And we would hang out together and hang out at the school library and be looking at art books. We would be introducing each other to different artists that we discovered, and we would just hang out and talk art and make art. Brent and I were both Beatles fans, and we connected through the Beatles, and we would listen to the songs and discuss them and talk about the music. In our junior year, John Lennon was shot and killed, and it was sort of devastating and just hard because most of our heroes were artists from long ago, dead people. And here was somebody, a hero from our own lifetime, who had died and was now gone. I remember Brent directing me on this one drawing, and he told me what to put in it, and he wanted me to fit as many skeletons as I could in the composition. It wasn't about being ironic or offensive. It was about synthesizing the reality, meeting the surreal aspect of death with surrealism. Death had been a part of my artwork up to that point, and then it would play a bigger part. And I started getting known as the guy who drew skulls. Students would come up to me and they would see what I was drawing, and one of the things I used to get was they would ask me, what kind of drugs did I take? And I always thought that was kind of funny because I didn't take drugs, and, I was a churchgoer. And so when they would ask me about what drugs I took it as a compliment, because what I saw was that they were seeing that I had imagination, and I prided myself on my imagination. And also, there was a quote I remember reading by Salvador Dali, and he said, "I don't take drugs. I am the drug. Take me." And basically what he was saying was that his art and his imagination will transport you, that art can open your mind and shake you up. I was also intense as a teenager. It was like I had this intensity, this almost a shadow side, a shadow self. And rather than it being this unconscious part of me that I hid away, my art became a way of bringing it to light. I grew up in a creative family. It was like creativity was just a way of life. My older brothers were creative, and there was always something going on in my family that had to do with creativity. My dad would always be working on cars and electronics projects, and he was an electronics and photography buff. He helped me on my animations, getting the lights and wiring down. My dad fixed up this tool shed in our backyard with electricity and with lights, and so I could have music, and it became my studio where I worked on my animation models into the night. A big breakthrough for me was when I brought my animation models to school. I had to give this demonstration speech in speech class, and I always hated speech class because I had to get up in front of people, and I went up in front of class and I had this paper bag and I started bringing out my animation models, and I brought out different stages of the models, from the wire skeletons to the finalized models, and the students loved it. They were hooked. They were genuinely interested and asking questions, and I was interacting with them and talking about something that I loved. And then I realized that I was up in front of people, but it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me getting attacked or being vulnerable for attack. And I definitely felt the power of having a visual aid, and having something in my hands that people could talk about, and the attention wasn't directly on me. And so I felt this energy and this esteem after, and I felt sort of a sense of accomplishment. And I also learned that there was nothing personal, that if I came forward with something that was interesting, then people would be interested. I would always sit in the back of class, and that way I could see the class and feel more comfortable, and didn't have the feeling of somebody behind me or people over my shoulder or looking at me. And I was always drawing in class, and when it came time to read or write something, I would definitely focus on class. And I actually did well in school, and part of it was because I was becoming stronger and I had this new sense of self-worth. My brother started bringing home art books, and I especially liked the Surrealists: Salvador Dali, Rene Magritte, Max Ernst. And then there were the Northern Renaissance artists like the Bruegels and Hieronymus Bosch, and these Flemish artists with this imagination that was very surrealistic before surrealism. They did similar things to what the surrealists did with their imagery and their imagination, and they would always have creatures that were made up of half human, half animal, half object, and insects. Very nightmarish imagery of beasts and demons, and I gravitated toward that. And there was also this religious aspect to their work. There was a symbolism, and I didn't understand what it was, but I was sort of mystified. What I took from that was that an artist can create imagery that mystifies and that sort of toggles the imagination. So there was this type of cryptic symbolism that I started adding to my own work. Though the imagery was often disturbing, it felt like that was the point. Surrealism and the imagination filled me with enchantment. The world was this enchanting place, but with the adult world and with society, I seemed disenchanted. And I also liked the morality parables around good and evil. And so I tried to imbue a lot of the images with a symbolism which I didn't know what they meant, even though they came out of me. I started developing an identity. I started relating to being an artist because that was a source of my new self-esteem, where I was feeling like I was the flawed one and that I wasn't normal and that other people were normal, healthy, and whole. You know, that's how the social anxiety sat with me. When I became an artist and claimed that identity, it sort of flipped. I saw myself as I'm the one who saw reality, and I saw everyone else as being blind and like lemmings coasting, and but I was the important one. I was the artist. I was the big thinker, and I was going to be somebody. Students would tell me stuff like, remember me when you're rich and famous, and you're going to go places. And I would eat it up, and I would agree with them, and I would say to myself, yeah, I'm going to be somebody. So on one hand, it gave me self-esteem. On the other hand, it gave me sort of this warped image of who I was and how life and the world worked. And so in a way, I was putting a lot of attention and work into these drawings because I felt like that was my ticket to humanity. At the same time, I was following my bliss. I always loved creatures and dinosaurs and life forms and spending time studying them and drawing. It was very soothing to just take out a piece of paper and see where it takes me. In the 70s, my dad became born again, and he was interested in the charismatics and the Pentecostals, and he started gravitating toward ideas about the apocalypse and the book of Revelation and the ends of time. He felt like these things were happening around us. So he would come to me and he would say, draw Revelation. These things are going to be happening. There's going to be the beast and the Antichrist and false prophets and plagues, and evil's going to be let loose across the land. And there's going to be these strange creatures, and people are going to need to see this stuff. And he knew it was up my alley as far as imagery goes. But I was 17 and 18, and my relationship to God was shifting more to the teachings of Jesus, more to the love one another brand of Christianity. And so all the stuff about the end of time and evil on the planet and Armageddon and all that didn't quite resonate with me. But I did read the book of Revelation, and I used some of the imagery and stories and some of the point of it, started to enter my own images. But for me, it had to do with chaos. It had to do with imbalance. We were throwing it all away. We were destroying the world and each other. We were seduced by evil and greed and causing pain to each other, and confused and sick and addicted and wreaking havoc on each other and on this creation. The whole idea of love and balance and harmony was eclipsed by our own blind thinking. So some of the intensities and imagery that is in some of this work is my attempt at apocalyptic imagery.
Now, you're an artist, and it's apparent that your film calls for an artist almost. Tell us about how you arrived at your philosophy of filming.
Lots of people feel negatively about the world, and so in the film I try to, at the beginning, have that negative feeling, but ended off with a more
It's up a little bit there.
Yeah.
Now, some artists paint with a brush and so forth. You use film as an art form. Is that?
That's one of the art forms.
One of the art forms.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah.
Okay. Our final film this evening is a very short one.
My interest in art making and drawing in this way would wane and give way to filmmaking. And as I kept meeting new friends who were interested in filmmaking, and I involved myself in making films, my drawings became more a tool for those things and less of an art form of itself that I was interested in. So I look at these drawings now as sort of a journal, like a diary of these years. These are my later teenage years. And it's interesting because when I think back on before I started these drawings, I was doing journal writing in notebooks. I started when I was 13 and I got really into it, and it was a great way to connect with myself and my inner world. And then this period in high school, these are my journal entries, like a diary of my imagination.